Boeing, from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. The Boeing Company is an American multinational corporation that designs, manufactures, and sells airplanes, rotorcraft, rockets, satellites, and missiles worldwide. The company also provides leasing and product support services. Boeing is among the largest global aircraft manufacturers. It is the third largest defense contractor in the world based on 2017 revenue and is the largest exporter in the United States by dollar value. Boeing stock is included in the Dow Jones Industrial Average. Boeing was founded by William Boeing on July 15, 1916, in Seattle, Washington. The present corporation is the result of the merger of Boeing with McDonnell Douglas on August 1, 1907. Former Boeing's chair and CEO Philip M. Conde continued as the chair and CEO of the new Boeing, while Harry Stonecipher, former CEO of McDonnell Douglas, became the president and chief operating officer of the newly merged company. The Boeing Company has its corporate headquarters in Chicago, Illinois. The company is led by President and CEO Dennis Muilenburg. Boeing is organized into 5 primary divisions: Boeing Commercial Airplane, BCA, Boeing Defense, Space and Security, BDS, Engineering, Operation and Technology, Boeing Capital, and Boeing Shared Services Group. In 2017, Boeing recorded $93.3 billion in sales, ranked 24th on the Fortune magazine Fortune 500 list of 2018, ranked 64th on the Fortune Global 500 list 2018, and ranked 19th on the World's Most Admired Companies list 2018. Before 1930, in March 1910, William Boeing bought Health Shipyard in Seattle on the Duwamish River, which later became his first airplane factory. Boeing was incorporated in Seattle by William Boeing on July 15, 1916, as Pacific Aero Products Company. Boeing was later incorporated in Delaware. The original certificate of incorporation was filed with the Secretary of State of Delaware on July 19, 1934. Boeing, who studied at Yale University, worked initially in the timber industry, where he became wealthy and learned about wooden structures. This knowledge proved invaluable in his subsequent design and assembly of airplanes. The company stayed in Seattle to take advantage of the local supply of spruce wood. One of the 2 B&W seaplanes, built with the assistance of George Conrad Westervelt, a U.S. Navy engineer, took its maiden flight on June 15, 1916. Boeing and Westervelt decided to build the B&W seaplane after having flown in a Curtiss aircraft. Boeing bought a Glenn Martin flying birdcage seaplane, so called because of all the wires holding it together, and was taught to fly by Glenn Martin himself. Boeing soon crashed the birdcage, and when Martin informed Boeing that replacement parts would not become available for months, Boeing realized he could build his own plane in that amount of time. He and his friend Commander J.C. Westervelt agreed to build a better airplane and soon produced the B&W plane. This first Boeing airplane was assembled in a lakeside hangar located on the northeast shore of Seattle's Lake Union. Many of Boeing's early planes were seaplanes. On April 6, 1917, the US declared war on Germany and entered World War I. On May 9, 1917, the company became the Boeing Airplane Company. With the US entering the war, Boeing knew that the US Navy needed seaplanes for training, so Boeing shipped 2 new Model CS to Pensacola, Florida, where the planes were flown for the Navy. The Navy liked the Model C and ordered 50 more. The company moved its operation to a larger former shipbuilding facility known as Boeing Plant 1, located on the lower Duwamish River on Washington State. When World War I ended in 1918, a large surplus of cheap, used military planes flooded the commercial airplane market, preventing aircraft companies from selling any new airplanes, driving many out of business. Others, including Boeing, started selling other products. Boeing built dressers, counters, and furniture, along with flat-bottom boats called sea sleds. In 1919, the Boeing B-1 flying boat made its first flight. It accommodated 1 pilot and 2 passengers and some mail. Over the course of 8 years, it made international Air May flights from Seattle to Victoria, British Columbia. On May 24, in 1920, the Boeing Model 8 made its first flight. It was the first plane to fly over Mount Rainier. In 1923, Boeing entered competition against Curtiss to develop a pursuit fighter for the US Army Air Service. Although Curtiss finished its design first and was awarded the contract, Boeing continued to develop its PW-9 fighter, that plane along with the Boeing P-12/F-4B fighter, made Boeing a leading manufacturer of fighters over the course of the next decade. In 1925, Boeing built its Model 40 May plane for the US government to use on Air May routes. In 1927, an improved version of this plane was built, the Model 40A, which won the US Post Office's contract to deliver May between San Francisco and Chicago. The 48A also had a passenger cabin that accommodated 2. That same year, Boeing created an airline named Boeing Air Transport, which merged a year later with Pacific Air Transport and the Boeing Airplane Company. The first airmail flight for the airline was on July 1 in 1927. In 1929, the company merged with Pratt & Whitney, Hamilton Aero Manufacturing Company, and Chance Vought under the new title United Aircraft and Transport Corporation. The merge was followed by the acquisition of the Sikorsky Manufacturing Corporation, Stearman Aircraft Corporation, and Standard Metal Proper Company. United Aircraft then purchased National Air Transport in the 1930s. On July 1928, the 12-passenger Boeing 80 biplane made its first flight. With 3 engines, it was Boeing's first plane built with the sole intention of being a passenger transport. An upgraded version, the 80A, carrying 18 passengers, made its first flight in September 1929. 1930s and 1940s. In the early 1930s, Boeing became a leader in all-metal aircraft construction and in the design revolution that established the path for other transport aircraft through the 30s. In 1930, the monomile, a low-wing monoplane that carried mail, was built entirely out of metal. It was more aerodynamic and had retractable landing gear. In fact, its design was so revolutionary that the engines and propellers of the time were not adequate to realize the potential of the plane. By the time controllable pitch propellers were developed, Boeing was built its Model 247 airliner. Two monomiles were built. The second one, the Model 221, had a six-passenger cabin. In 1931, the monomile design became the foundation of the Boeing Yankee Bravo 9, the first all-metal cantilever-wing monoplane bomber. 5 examples entered service between September 1932 and March 1933. The performance of the twin-engine monoplane bomber led to reconsideration of air defense requirements, although it was soon rendered obsolete by rapidly advancing bomber designs. In 1932, Boeing introduced the Model 248, the first all-metal monoplane fighter. The P-26 Pea Shooter was in frontline service with the US Army Air Corps from 1934 to 1938. In the 1933, the Boeing 247 was introduced, which set the standard for all competitors in the passenger transport market. The 247 was an all-metal low-wing monoplane that was much faster, safer, and easier to fly than other passenger aircraft. For example, it was the first twin-engine passenger aircraft that could fly on one engine in an era of unreliable engines. This vastly improved flight safety. Boeing built the first 59 aircraft exclusively for its own United Airlines subsidiaries operations. These badly hurt competing airlines and was typical of the anti-competitive corporate behavior that the US government sought to prohibit at the time. The direction established with the 247 was further developed by Douglas Aircraft, resulting in one of the most successful designs in aviation history. The Air Mile Act of 1934 prohibited airlines and manufacturers from being under the same corporate umbrella, so the company split into 3 smaller companies: Boeing Airplane Company, United Airlines, and United Aircraft Corporation, the precursor to United Technologies. Boeing retained the Stearman facilities in Wichita, Kansas. Following the breakup of United Aircraft, William Boeing sold off his shares and left Boeing. Clermont Claire L. Egtved, who had become Boeing's president in 1933, became the chairman as well. He believed the company's future was in building bigger planes. Work began in 1936 on Boeing Plant 2 to accommodate the production of larger modern aircraft. From 1934 to 1937, Boeing was developing an experimental long-range bomber, the X-Bravo 15. At its introduction in 1937, it was the largest ever than aircraft built to date. Trials revealed that its speed was unsatisfactory, but the design experience was used in the development of the Model 314 that followed a year later. Overlapping with the period of the Yankee Bravo 15 development, an agreement with Pan American World Airways, Pan Am, was reached to develop and build a commercial flying boat able to carry passengers on transoceanic routes. The first flight of the Boeing 314 Clipper was in June 1938. It was the largest civil aircraft of its time, with a capacity of 90 passengers on day flights and of 40 passengers on night flights. 1 year later, the first regular passenger service from the US to the UK was inaugurated. Subsequently, other routes were opened, so that soon Pan Am flew with the Boeing 314 to destinations all over the world. In 1938, Boeing completed work on its Model 307 Stratoliner. This was the world's first pressurized cabin transport aircraft, and it was capable of cruising at an altitude of 20,000 feet, approximately 6,100 meters, above most weather disturbances. It was based on the B-17, using the same wings, tail, and engines. During World War II, Boeing built a large number of B-17 and B-29 bombers. Boeing ranked 12th among United States corporations in the value of wartime production contracts. In the beginning of March 1944, production had been scaled up in such a manner that over 350 planes were built each month. To prevent an attack from the air, the manufacturing plants had been covered with greenery and farmland dams. During the war years, the leading aircraft companies of the US cooperated. The Boeing-designed B-17 bomber was assembled also by Lockheed Aircraft Company and Douglas Aircraft Company, while the B-29 was assembled also by Bell Aircraft Company and by Glenn L. Martin Company. In 1942, Boeing started development of the C-97 Stratofighter, the first of a generation of heavy-lift military transports. It became operational in 1947. The C-97 design will be successfully adapted for use as an aerial refueling tanker, although its role as a transport was soon limited by designs that had advantages in either versatility or capacity. After the war, most orders of bombers were cancelled and 70,000 people lost their jobs at Boeing. The company aimed to recover quickly by selling its Stratocruiser, the Model 377, a luxurious four-engine commercial airliner derived from the C-97. However, shares of this model were not as expected, and Boeing had to seek other opportunities to overcome the situation. In 1947, Boeing flew its first jet aircraft, the Bravo 47, from which the highly successful Bravo 47 and Bravo 52 bombers were derived. In years 50s, Boeing developed military jets such as the B-47 Stratojet and B-52 Stratofortress bombers in the late 40s and into the 50s. During the early 50s, Boeing used company funds to develop the 367 straight-eight jet airliner, demonstrator that led to the KC-135 Stratotanker and Boeing 707 jetliner. Some of these were built at Boeing's facilities in Wichita, Kansas, which existed from 31 to 2014. Between the last delivery of a 377 in 50s and the first order for the 707 in 55, Boeing was shut out of the commercial aircraft market. In the mid-50s, technology had advanced significantly, which gave Boeing the opportunity to develop and manufacture new products. One of the first was the guided short-range missile used to intercept enemy aircraft. By that time, the Cold War had become a fact of life, and Boeing used its short-range missile technology to develop and build an intercontinental missile. In 1958, Boeing began delivery of its 770, the United States' first commercial jet airliner, in response to the British de Havilland Comet, French Sud Aviation Caravelle, and Soviet Tupolev Tu-104, which were the world's first generation of commercial jet aircraft. With the 707, a four-engine, 156-passenger airliner, the US became a leader in commercial jet manufacturing. A few years later, Boeing added a second version of this aircraft, the Boeing 720, which was slightly faster and had a shorter range. Boeing was a major producer of small turbine engines during the 50s and 60s. The engine represented one of the company's major efforts to expand its product base beyond military aircraft after World War II. Development on the gas turbine engine started in 1943, and Boeing's gas turbines were designated models 502, the T-50, and 520, the T-60, and 540, 551, and 553. Boeing built 2,461 engines before production ceased in April 68. Many applications of the Boeing gas turbine engines were considered to be firsts, including the first turbine-powered helicopter and boat. Years 60s. In 1960s, Vertol Aircraft Corporation was acquired by Boeing in 60 and was reorganized as Boeing's Vertol division. The twin-rotor CH-47 of Chinook, produced by Vertol, took its first flight in 61. This heavy-lift helicopter remains a workhorse vehicle to the present day. In 1964, Vertol also began production of the CH-46 Sea Knight. In December 60, Boeing announced the Model 727 jetliner, which went into commercial service about 3 years later. Different passenger, freight, and convertible freighter variants were developed for the 727. The 727 was the first commercial jetliner to reach 1,000 sails. On May 21, in 1961, the company shortened its name to the current Boeing Company. Boeing won a contract in 1961 to manufacture the SEC stage of the Saturn V rocket, manufactured at the Michoud Assembly Facility in New Orleans, Louisiana. In 1966, Boeing President William M. Allen asked Malcolm T. Stamper to spearhead production of the new 747 airliner, on which the company's future was riding. This was a monumental engineering and management challenge and included construction of the world's biggest factory in which to build the 747 at Everett, Washington, a plant which is the size of 40 football fields. In 1967, Boeing introduced another short and medium-range airliner, the twin-engine 737. It has since become the best-selling commercial jet aircraft in aviation history. Several versions have been developed mainly to increase seating capacity and range. The 737 remains in production as of February 2018 with the latest 737 MAX series. The rollout ceremonies for the first 747-100 took place in '68 at the massive new factory in Everett, about an hour's drive from Boeing's Seattle home. The aircraft made its first flight a year later. The first commercial flight occurred in '70s. The 747 has an intercontinental range and a larger seating capacity than Boeing's previous aircraft. Boeing also developed hydrofoils in the '60s. The screw-driven USS High Point PCH-1 was an experimental submarine hunter. The patrol hydrofoil USS Tucumcari PGH-2 was more successful. Only one was built, but it saw service in Vietnam and Europe before running aground in '72. Its water jet and fully submerged flying foils were the example for the later Pegasus-class patrol hydrofoils and the Model 929 jet foil ferries in the '80s. The Tucumcari and later boats were produced in Ranton, while the Navy hydrofoils were withdrawn from service in the late '80s. The Boeing jet foils are still in service in Asia. 1970s. In the early '70s, Boeing suffered from the simultaneous decline in Vietnam War military spending, the slowing of the space program as Project Apollo neared completion, the recession of '69-'70s, and the company's $2 billion debt as it built the new 747 airliner. Boeing did not receive any orders for more than a year. Its bet for the future. The 747 was delayed in production by 3 months because of problems with its Pratt & Whitney engines. Then, in March '71, Congress voted to discontinue funding for the development of the Boeing 707 supersonic transport SST, the huge answer to the British-French Concorde, forcing the end of the project. Commercial Airplane Group, by far the largest unit of Boeing, went from 83,700 employees in '68 to 9,750 in '71. Each unemployed Boeing employee cost at least one other job in the Seattle area, and unemployment rose to 14%, the highest in the United States. Housing vacancy rates rose to 16% from 1% in '67. U-Haul dealerships ran out of trailers because so many people moved out. A billboard appeared near the airport. Will the last person leaving Seattle turn out the lights? In January 1970, the first 747, a 4-engine long-range airliner, flew its first commercial flight with Pan American World Airways. The 747 changed the airline industry, providing much larger seating capacity than any other airliner in the production. The company has delivered over 1,500 Boeing 747. The 747 has undergone continuous improvements to keep it technologically up to date. Larger versions have also been developed by stretching the upper deck. The newest version of the 747, the 747-800, remains in production as of 2018. Boeing launched three jetfoil 929 straight 100 aerofoils that were accurate in 75 for service in the Hawaiian Islands. When the service ended in 1979, the three hydrofoils were accurate by Far East Hydrofoil for service between Hong Kong and Macau. During the 70s, Boeing also developed the standard light drive vehicle, which has been used in San Francisco, Boston, and Morgantown in West Virginia. Years 1980s. In 1983, the economic situation began to improve. Boeing assembled its 1,737 passenger aircraft. During the following years, commercial aircraft and their military versions became the basic equipment of airlines and air forces. As passenger air traffic increased, competition was harder, mainly from Airbus, a European newcomer in commercial airliner manufacturing. Boeing had to offer new aircraft and developed the single-aisle 757, the larger twin-aisle 767, and upgraded version of the 737. An important project of these years was the Space Shuttle, to which Boeing contributed with its experience in space rockets, accurate during the Apollo era. Boeing participated also with other products in the space program and was the first contractor for the International Space Station program. During the decade, several military projects went into production, including Boeing's support of the B-2 stealth bomber as part of an industry team led by Northrop. Boeing built the B-2's other wing portion, AFT center fuselage section, landing gear, fuel system, and weapons delivery system. At its peak in 1991, the B-2 was the largest military program at Boeing, employing about 10,000 people. The same year, the US National Aeronautic Association awarded the B-2 design team the Collier Trophy for the greatest achievement in aerospace in America. The first B-2 rolled out of the bomber's final assembly facility in Palmdale, California, in November 1988, and it flew for the first time on July 17 in 1989. The Avenger air defense system and new generation of short-range missiles also went into production. During these years, Boeing was very active in upgrading military equipment and developing new ones. Boeing also contributed to wind power development with the experimental Mod 2 wind turbines for NASA and the United States Department of Energy and the Mod 5B for Hawaii. 90s. Boeing was one of 7 competing companies that bid for the Advanced Tactical Fighter. Boeing agreed to team with General Dynamics and Lockheed so that all 3 companies would participate in the development if one of the 3 companies' designs was selected. The Lockheed design was eventually selected and developed into the Fox 22 Raptor. In April 1994, Boeing introduced the most modern commercial jet aircraft at the time, the twin-engine 777, with a seating capacity of approximately 300 to 370 passengers and a typical 3-class layout, and between the 767 and the 747. The longest range twin-engined aircraft in the world, the 777, was the first Boeing airliner to feature a fly-by-wire system and was conceived partly in response to the inroads being made by the European Airbus into Boeing's traditional market. This aircraft reached an important milestone by being the first airliner to be designed entirely by using computer-aided design, the CAD techniques. The 777 was also the first airplane to be certified for 180 minutes tops at entry into service by the FAA. Also, in the mid-90s, the company developed the revamped version of the 737, known as the 737 Next Generation or 737 NG. It has since become the fastest-selling version of the 737 in history, and on April 20, 2006, sales passed those of the classic 737 with a follow-up order for 79 aircraft from Southwest Airlines. In year 1995, Boeing chose to demolish the headquarters complex on East Marginal West Side instead of upgrading it to match new seismic standards. The headquarters were moved to an adjacent building and the facility was demolished in 1996. In 1997, Boeing was headquartered on East Marginal West Side by King County Airport in Seattle. In 1996, Boeing acquired Rockwell's aerospace and defense units. The Rockwell business units became a subsidiary of Boeing, named Boeing North American ENC in August 1997. Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas in a $13 billion stock swap, with Boeing as the surviving company. Following the merger, the McDonnell Douglas MD-95 was renamed the Boeing 717, and the production of the MD-11 trijet was limited to the freighter version. Boeing introduced a new corporate identity with completion of the merger, incorporating the Boeing logotype and a stylized version of the McDonnell Douglas symbol, which was derived from the Douglas aircraft logo from the 70s. An aerospace analyst criticized the CEO and his deputy, Philip McCondy and Harry Stonesifer, for thinking of their personal benefits first and causing the problems to Boeing many years later. Instead of investing the hush cash reserve to build new airplanes, they initiated a program to buy back Boeing stock for more than $10 billion. In May 1999, Boeing studied Boeing and Embraer to encourage commonality between the jets and the Boeing 717, but this was nixed by then-President Harry Stonesifer. He preferred Boeing Bombardier Aerospace, but its owner, the Baudouin family, asked for a price too high for Boeing, which remembered its mid-90s purchase of the Havilland Canada, losing $1 million every day for 3 years before selling it to Bombardier in 1992. Between year 2000 and year 2009. In January 2000, Boeing chose to expand its presence in another aerospace field of satellite communication by purchasing Hug Electronics. In September 2001, Boeing moved its corporate headquarters from Seattle to Chicago, Dallas, and Denver, vying to become the new home of the world's largest aerospace concern. Or had offered packages of multi-million-dollar tax breaks. Its offices are located in the Fulton River District, just outside the Chicago Loop. On October 10, 2001, Boeing lost to its rival Lockheed Martin in the first competition for the multi-billion-dollar Joint Strike Fighter contract. Boeing's entry, the X-32, was rejected in favor of Lockheed's X-35 entrant. Boeing continues to serve as the prime contractor on the International Space Station and has built several of the major components. Boeing began development of the Casey 767 aerial refueling tanker in the early 2000s. Italy and Japan ordered 4 Casey 767 each, After development delays and FAA certification, Boeing delivered the tankers to Japan from 2008 with the second Cassie 767 following on March 5 to 2010. Italy received its 4 Cassie 767 during year 2011. In 2004, Boeing ended production of the 757 after 1,050 aircraft were produced. More advanced, stretched versions of the 737 were beginning to compete against the 757. And the Planet 787-3 was to fill much of the top end of the 757 market. Also that year, Boeing announced that the 717, the last civil aircraft to be designed by McDonnell Douglas, would cease production in 2006. The 767 was in danger of cancellation as well, with the 787 replacing it, but orders for the freighter version extended the program. After several decades of success, Boeing lost ground to Airbus and subsequently lost its lead in the airliner market in 2003. Multiple Boeing projects were pursued and then cancelled, notably the Sonic Cruiser, a proposed jetliner that will travel just under the speed of sound, cutting intercontinental travel times by as much as 20%. It was launched in 2001, along with the new advertising campaign to promote the company's new motto, Forever New Frontiers, and to rehabilitate its image. However, the plane's fate was sealed by the changes in the commercial aviation market following the September 11 attacks and the subsequent weak economy and increase in fuel prices. Subsequently, Boeing streamlined its production and turned its attention to a new model, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner. Using much of the technology developed for the Sonic Cruiser, but in a more conventional aircraft designed for maximum efficiency. The company also launched new variants of its successful 737 and 777 models. The 787 proved to be a highly popular choice with airlines and won a record number of pre-launch orders. With delays to Airbus A380 program, several airlines threatened to switch their A380 orders to Boeing new 747 version, the 747-8. Airbus response to the 787, the Airbus 350, received a lukewarm response. At first, when it was announced as an improved version of the A330, and then gained significant order when Airbus promised an entirely new design. The 787 program encountered delays, with the first flight not occurring until late 2009. After regulatory approval, Boeing formed a joint venture, United Launch Alliance, with its competitor Lockheed Martin on December 1, 2006. The new venture is the largest provider of rocket launch services to the U.S. government. In 2005, Gary Scott, ex-Boeing executive and then head of Bombardier's C-Series program, suggested a collaboration on the upcoming C-Series, but an internet study assessed Embraer as the best partner for regional jets. The Brazilian government wanted to retain control and blocked an acquisition. On August 2, 2005, Boeing sold its Rocket engine division to Pratt & Whitney. On May 1, 2006, Boeing agreed to purchase Dallas, Texas-based Avial ENC for $1.7 billion and retain $350 million in debt. Avial ENC and its subsidiaries, Avial Services ENC and ELS, formed a wholly owned subsidiary of Boeing Commercial Aviation Services, Bravo Charlie Alpha Sierra. Realizing that increasing numbers of passengers have become reliant on their computers to stay in touch, Boeing introduced Connection by Boeing, a satellite-based internet connectivity service that promised air travelers unprecedented access to the World Wide Web. The company debuted the product to journalists in 2005. Receiving generally favorable reviews, however, facing competition from cheaper options, such as cellular networks, it proved too difficult to sell to most airlines. In August 2006, after a short and unsuccessful search for a buyer for the business, Boeing chose to discontinue the service. On August 18, 2007, NASA selected Boeing as the manufacturing contractor for the liquid-fueled upper stage of the RS-1 rocket. The stage, based on both Apollo Saturn and Space Shuttle technologies, was to be constructed at NASA's Michoud Assembly Facility near New Orleans. Boeing constructed the East Strait 1C stage of the Saturn V rocket at this site in the 60s. Boeing launched the 777 freighter in May 2005 with an order from Air France. The freighter variant is based on the 200 Lima Romeo. Other customers include FedEx and Emirates. Boeing officially announced in November 2005 that it would produce a larger variant of the 747, the 747-8, and two versions, commencing with the freighter version with firm orders for two cargo carriers. The second version, named the Intercontinental, is for passenger airlines. But both 747-8 versions feature a lengthened fuselage, new advanced engines and wings, and the incorporation of other technologies developed for the 787. Boeing also received the launch contract from the US Navy for the P-8 Poseidon multi-mission maritime aircraft and anti-submarine warfare patrol aircraft. It has also received orders for the 737 AEW and C wedge-tie aircraft. The company has also introduced new extended range version of the 737. These include the 737-700 Eco Romeo and 737-900 Eco Romeo or ER. The 737-900 ER is the latest and will extend the range of the 737-900 to a similar range as the successful 737-800, with the capability to fly more passengers due to the addition of two extra emergency exits. The 777-200 Lima Romeo LR Worldliner embarked on a well-received global demonstration tour in the second half of 2005, showing off its capacity to fly farther than any other commercial aircraft. On November 10, 2005, the 777-200 Lima Romeo set a world record for the longest non-stop flight. The plane, which departed from Hong Kong traveling to London, took a longer route which including flying over the US. It flew 11,664 nautical miles, approximately 21,601 kilometers during its 22-hour 42-minute flight. It was flown by Pakistan International Airlines pilots, and PIA was the first airline to fly the 777-200 Lima Romeo worldliner. On August 11, 2006, Boeing agreed to form a joint venture with the large Russian titanium producer Victor Sierra Mike Papa Oscar Avisma for the machining of titanium forgings. The forgings will be used on the 787 program. In December 2007, Boeing and Victor Sierra Mike Papa Oscar Avisma created a joint venture, Ural Boeing Manufacturing, and signed a contract on titanium product deliveries until 2015, with Boeing planning to invest $27 billion in Russia over the next 30 years. In February 2011, Boeing received a contract for 179 KC-46 US Air Force tankers at a value of $35 billion. The KC-46 tankers are based on the KC-1767. Boeing, along with Science Application International Corporation (SAIC), were the prime contractors in the U.S. military's Future Combat System program. The Fox Charlie Sierra program was cancelled in June 2009, with all remaining systems swept into the Bravo Charlie Tango modernization program. Boeing works jointly with SAIC in the Bravo Charlie Tango modernization program like the Fox Charlie S Sierra program, but the US Army will play a greater role in creating baseline vehicles and will only contract orders for accessories. Defense Secretary Mr. Robert McGates shifted in defense spending to make tough choice about specific systems and defense priorities based solely on the national interest, and then stick to those decisions over time. It Boeing especially hard because of their heavy involvement with cancelled Air Force projects. Unethical conduct. In May 2003, the US Air Force announced it will lease 100 KC-767 tankers to replace the oldest 136 KC-135s in November 2003, responding to critics who argued that the lease was more expensive than an outright purchase. The DoD announced the revised lease of 20 aircraft and purchase of 80. In December 2003, the Pentagon announced the project was to be frozen with an investigation of allegation of corruption by one of its former procurement staffers. Darlene Druyun, who began employment at Boeing in January, was began. The fallout of this resulted in the resignation of Boeing CEO Philip M. Conde and the termination of CFO Michael M. Sears. Harris Schiffer, former McDonnell Douglas CEO and Boeing COO, replaced Conde on an interim basis. Druyun pleaded guilty to inflating the price of the contract to favor her future employer and to passing information on the competing Airbus A330 Mike Romeo Tango bid. In October 2004, she received a sentence of 9 months in federal prison, 7 months in a community facility, and 3 years probation. In March 2005, the Boeing board forced President and CEO Harris Schiffer to resign. Boeing said an internal investigation revealed a consensual relationship between Schiffer and the female executive that was inconsistent with Boeing's code of conduct and would impair his ability to lead the company. James Abel served as interim CEO in addition to his normal duties as Boeing's CFO until the appointment of Jim McNerney as the new chairman, president, and CEO on June 30, 2005. industrial espionage. In June 2003, Lockheed Martin sued Boeing, alleging that the company has resorted to industrial espionage in 1998 to win the evolved expendable launch vehicles Eco-Lima Victor competition. Lockheed Martin claimed that the former employee Kenneth Branch, who went to work for McDonnell Douglas and Boeing, passed nearly 30,000 pages of proprietary documents to his new employers. Lockheed Martin argued that these documents allowed Boeing to win 19 to 28 tendered military satellite launches. In July 2003, Boeing was penalized with the Pentagon stripping 7 launches away from the company and awarding them to Lockheed Martin. Furthermore, the company was forbidden to bid for rocket contracts for a 20-month period, which expired in March 2005. In early September 2005, it was reported that Boeing was negotiating a settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice in which it would pay up $500 million to cover this and the Darlene Drune scandal. The 92-year SCS agreement notes. Until the late 70s, the US had a near monopoly in the large civil aircraft LCA sector. The Airbus consortium, created in 1969, started competing effectively in the 80s. At that stage, the US became concerned about European competition and the alleged subsidies paid by the European governments for the development of the early models of the Airbus family. This became a major issue of contention, as the European side was equally concerned by subsidies accruing to US LCA manufacturers through NASA and defense programs. Europe and the US started bilateral negotiations for the limitation of government subsidies to the LCA sector in the late 80s. Negotiations were concluded in 1992 with the signing of the SCS agreement on trade in large civil aircraft, which imposes disciplines on government support on both sides of the Atlantic, which are significantly stricter than the relevant World Trade Organization WTO rules. Notably, the agreement regulates in detail the forms and limits of government support, prescribes transparency obligations, and commits the parties to avoiding trade disputes.